Welcome back, everybody, to Watcher of All Things. My name is Kiki, and this is my podcast where I talk movies, TV shows, and all things entertainment. And today, it is a mega episode. We are finally talking Megalopolis. It's episode 37. We are going to dive in. I have so many thoughts. I saw this very late last night. It is Friday the 27th. I saw it a 9:45 IMAX screening. The IMAX experience of Megalopolis. It was pretty wild. A decent turnout. I hope you have had a wonderful week as usual. I just quickly want to say before we get into anything, thank you so much. I am getting a lot more downloads and just like so much interaction, and the numbers are constantly going up for this show. And thank you all so much for listening every week and tuning in and jumping on board. It's been very fun. I have so much to say about Megalopolis, so I'm gonna kind of keep the intro short. Just a reminder, there are timestamps below in the description and the show notes on your YouTube and on whatever podcast streamer you are using. So if you want to just hear the non-spoiler section of Megalopolis, you can absolutely do that. You can skip over the spoiler section. If you don't want to know anything about Megalopolis, you can just listen to the news and what else I watch, because I have lots to talk about there as well. But there is some big news, so I say we get right into it before we get into Megalopolis. All right, well, it looks like our search for Hal Jordan has come to an end, because Deadline, Variety, everyone is reporting that Kyle Chandler is in talks, and in fact, I think it's in final negotiations probably right now, that Kyle Chandler will be playing Hal Jordan in the Green Lantern Corps series. So the show is officially titled Lanterns, and it's been described as like a true detective type TV show. That's why they were looking for a Matthew McConaughey type. So I think it's very clear that Hal Jordan will be passing the baton down to Jon Stewart throughout the series. There still isn't a confirmed Jon Stewart. I've seen a few different people that may have been offered the role or who they're thinking, so I'm very excited for that, because the Green Lantern I grew up with was Jon Stewart, watching Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. I don't know, back to Kyle Chandler's Hal Jordan, I think it's a solid choice. I really have not seen tons of Kyle Chandler stuff, and I feel like everything I have seen him in, he's not really the focus of the movie or the TV show. I just know that he's perfectly fine in everything I see him in. So I don't think this is a terrible casting by any means. I think this is perfectly okay. I think he's never giving a bad performance when I see him. I'll put it that way. So I'm actually somewhat excited for this show. I don't know. I've seen two DC things so far under James Gunn, or under kind of the production of James Gunn and Peter Safran, and both of them have been really great. One of them I'll talk about today because I finally saw something last weekend. Kyle Chandler's an Emmy winner. Apparently the show's going to start shooting in January, but the fact that there's not really a clear Hal Jordan decision or announcement made, and there's not a clear Jon Stewart announced yet, is interesting. But I know they have directors on board. The show's already written. Like, they have the director who did the Iron Claw. He is going to be doing a few episodes, I think. I think it is a limited series. Probably the show, as I said, will just be Hal Jordan handing down the baton to Jon Stewart, but really cool. I don't know, I just think that the fact that they're taking their time with this, and it looks like they're really trying to shop it around. And I know this show has really been in like production purgatory for a while. I think it's been a few different iterations, or at least it's been delayed a bunch of times, or had a bunch of different phases to it because of Warner Brothers and their shifting ownership / DC regime. It looks like it's finally going to hit the ground in the new year. It's almost October when this episode's going to drop, and I still think they have tons of time. It's going to shoot for a while, being an HBO limited series. It's like shooting a film now, so it's gonna take a while, but to me that's good news. I think Kyle Chandler will be a very solid choice. All of the options were good. I think I said mine were Chris Pine and Timothy Olyphant that I wanted, but Kyle Chandler seems like a very capable choice. I think it will be absolutely fine. I'm more excited to see who Jon Stewart is going to be played by, because I love Jon Stewart. I think he was like one of the best parts of Always in the Justice League shows. It looks like we are finally getting some closure on our Kyle Chandler, I guess our Green Lantern story that I've been covering for like the last 3 weeks, I guess. I've been giving an update every week, I feel like now, for 3 weeks. First it was Josh Brolin, then he passed, then they moved on to other people, and now I guess it's kind of, this is it. So what a wild ride. All right, and some honestly disheartening news. James Cameron joins Board of Stability AI in coup for tech firm. So James Cameron, Canadian icon, he's someone that is loved in Canada, but the director says that, quote, the intersection of generative AI and CGI image creation is the next wave of film technology as he joins the company behind the popular Stable Diffusion AI model. In a major coup for the artificial intelligence company Stability AI, says that Avatar, Terminator, and Titanic director James Cameron will join its board of directors. So Stability AI is the firm that developed the Stable Diffusion text-to-image generative AI model, an image and video-focused model that is among those being closely watched by many in Hollywood, particularly in the visual effects industry. I was a little sad to read this, to be honest, and I think there was a lot of mutual feelings online of other people really shocked by this. I mean, for the guy who made Terminator, which is literally, I don't know, fear of robots and shit like that, I feel like James Cameron has been warning us about AI for so many years now, specifically in the last couple of years. And now the fact that he's on a board of directors, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to cancel James Cameron or something like that. I just feel like it's an interesting choice, but maybe, it's a little bit keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. Like by being on the board of directors, maybe he can help implement it in a safe way, but at the same time it's still going to take tons of jobs away of visual effect artists. So I don't know, it's kind of a mixed bag for me. I'm kind of disappointed in this, but again, it could be like kind of because he is so wary about AI and the future of AI and it taking over film. I mean, I'm very much of the stance that AI will never take over film. You've watched those AI generated like movies or videos or whatever? They're soulless. There's nothing going on in them. It's just like empty space and nothing interesting. I like films because it is a creative vision with real people and soul. You know what I mean? Like I feel like every time I see a generated AI video or even photos online, I'm never impressed. I'm always like, this is scary. This is gross. Like it just feels also fake and nobody put effort into this. Like typing something is an effort. You just like typed a keyword and it created it for you. Yeah, look, I mean, the fact that a year ago or the last 2 years there's been strikes and so many discussions about the role of AI in film and how it's going to roll forward, and now one of the biggest advocators for warning us about AI is on a board of directors for one of the most popular AI firms from my understanding. It's a little worrying. So I don't know, I'd love to hear what do you people think about AI in film. Like I very much get the stance of some people that like, oh, it's going to be a tool and it's already here. Yeah, I get that, it is, and that's probably how people thought about CGI when it started, that like, oh, nobody's making models anymore, like we're just gonna let the computer do it. But there's still craftsmanship that's going into the computer generated models and tweaking and stuff like that. Maybe that'll be AI in the future, I don't know. Get in touch with me. I would love to hear what you all think about the role of AI, not just in films but like kind of in the workplace in general, and what you think the next kind of 5 years of AI is going to look like. All right, well, in some more exciting news, Matthias Schoenaerts, I believe is how you say his name. He's a Belgian actor. He has been cast as the villain in Supergirl alongside Millie Alcock. So he was in something called Rust and Bone, and he's landed the role of DC's Supergirl's villain, according to Deadline and Variety. Supergirl is, of course, based on Tom King's 2022 comic book series Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, which Bilquis Evely illustrated. Anna Noguera adapted the comic book for the big screen. In that comic, the bad guy is Krem of the Yellow Hill, who kills a young alien girl's father. She draws Supergirl into the conflict. I was thinking this week, so I just finished God Emperor of Dune, which I won't talk about what else I watched, I don't think, but it was really the hardest book to get through in the series so far. But I'm thinking that once I finish all the 6 Dune books, I have a bunch of graphic novel, or not a bunch, I have like probably 10 to 15 graphic novel books, and I think I'm just gonna binge read them all, until I'm done. And then there's a few that I really want to read after. I'd love to read the Scott Snyder omnibus, Grant Morrison omnibus of Batman, all those collections. I just got All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison as well, but also I don't know, I'm hesitant to read Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow because I don't want the movie spoiled for me, but at the same time, Superman is really going to be based on the All-Star Superman, a lot of it. So am I spoiling it for myself? I don't know, but I have heard only really positive things about the Supergirl run, that it is amazing, Tom King's run, and like it's going to make a great movie. So I'm very excited for that. He apparently, I don't know, I saw a lot of positive positive reaction of people saying like, oh, he's a really good like villain. He's going to be very good in this. This week there were rumblings online that I think it was fully confirmed that Millie Alcock is actually going to show up in Superman. I kind of hope it's just a post-credit scene. I'd be totally fine with that. I would love if DC would do kind of what Marvel did in like phase 1, phase 2, when post-credit scenes were literally just a small snippet of the next movie or like a hint at the next movie. Rather than now, I feel like a lot of Marvel post-credit scenes don't really lead to anything. It's them introducing a new character for a potential sequel, and then it hasn't really led to any, like I'm thinking Hercules and Thor Love and Thunder, or Harry Styles in Eternals. Like, to me, it feels like Marvel post-credit scenes aren't really doing anything anymore. They're just kind of, I don't know, setting up a sequel that will probably never come. You know, I would love if DC could maybe take a page out of the phase 1 Marvel playbook and make your post-credit scenes like a fun, here's what to come in the next movie that's coming out. You know, invite audiences back and make them feel more involved in it. All right, final piece of news I'm going to get into before Megalopolis. I have tons to say about Megalopolis, so let's finish on a fun note. I feel like finishing on a positive note this week. Bill Hader is developing a new HBO comedy series with Barry writer Duffy Boudreaux. So Bill Hader and Duffy Boudreaux are teaming up to develop a comedy pilot script at HBO, Variety has learned exclusively. The official logline for the untitled project states, a woman in a small town has a big secret revealed. Hader and Boudreaux will serve as co-writers and executive producers on the project. I did like a Tom Cruise jump on the couch when I read this, because just last night I was laying in bed and the Barry scene where Fred Armisen is there to kill him in the final season showed up on my TikTok, and I was like, God, I miss Barry so much. That show is just hilarious. I've watched it over like 4 times. This is really great news to me. And particularly, I think credit should go to HBO. They are greenlighting a lot of great comedy pilot ideas. I think Rachel Sennett just last week got a pilot greenlit. They've already done the Tim Robinson Chair Company or whatever one. They did the Rehearsal with Nathan Fielder, right? Yeah, because I loved that show. That was HBO. So I don't know. HBO is doing some very interesting stuff comedy-wise. They're greenlighting a lot of really great original projects, and I'm excited to see where this goes. I think Barry is a very one-of-a-kind show. Like, there was, man, just the creativity that went into Barry was mind-blowing at times, and just the tonal changes over the seasons was so awesome. I know some people aren't fans of the final season of Barry, and I get that because it does feel like a large departure from that first season, but I loved it. I loved the character evolutions. I loved like the move into a more dramatic, let's try not to, you know, we're on the run type vibes. And I thought the finale was perfect for Barry. I absolutely loved the finale. To me, Barry is a flawless show. There is not a season of that show that I do not like. Oh man, I just remember when it started, I watched the pilot at my friend's house, and I was like, I don't think I've ever seen anything like this. Just the idea of a hitman becoming an actor, or like going to do a hit, and he walks into an acting class and finds like a new passion, just felt so fresh and original to me. So that's really great news to me. I hope Bill Hader, I think he directed Barry, a lot of it at least, the final season definitely. I hope he directs some episodes of this, because he was a great director on Barry, and that show was so well made. If you haven't watched Barry, I would recommend Barry 1000%. That is something that, like, a show that you should not miss, because it is so funny, but it's also just like so dramatic and has some of the best, I don't know, just emotional arcs I've seen on TV that I seriously love. There's so many amazing performances in it. So there you go, a Friday recommendation, Barry, for you. And I think we're going to wrap up the news there. So we got some casting news for some heroes and some villains in DC. We got some scary stuff with James Cameron and AI. I really don't know where AI is going to lead us in the future, but whatever. Just enjoy the here and now. And finally, we finished with some great news about Bill Hader. And let's move on to another artistic endeavor that has gone on for many years. As I said, there's timestamps below. If you don't want to know anything about Megalopolis, skip ahead to what else I watched. I got lots to talk about there. Or if you're fine with the non-spoiler section, because I don't spoil anything, stick around. But let's do it. I'm freaking pumped for this. Episode 37. Let's get into Megalopolis. Megalopolis is a 2024 sci-fi drama. It currently holds a 50% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, so as divisive as you can get. I think if you have Letterboxd, go look at the ratings, go look at the average ratings, because it is one of the most divisive ratings. I feel like, and maybe this is a movie that shouldn't get a rating, because it is literally something I have never seen before, if that makes sense. Like, it is one of the most unique experiences I've ever ever had at the movie theater. Google's in a nutshell describes it as epic, electrifying, and forceful. It was made for $120 million, self-financed. Before I get into the cast and the synopsis, I think it's important to hear the development of this movie and the behind the scenes. So this is all coming from Wikipedia. I want to read you this blurb. So, in development for decades, Megalopolis came from Coppola's desire to make a film drawing parallels between the fall of Rome and the future of the United States. By setting the events of the Catalanarian conspiracy in modern New York City, he conceived the idea for the film in 1977 and actively started developing it in 1983 by assembling notes for a future script. Preparations for a film based around his initial concept came together in 1989 to be shot in Rome, but it was postponed after Coppola prioritized other projects to pay his debt to Hollywood after a string of box office disappointments. He revived the project in 2001, holding table reads with prominent actors in New York, but after the September 11th attacks, an event that resembled the film's plot and themes, Megalopolis was again abandoned. Having become disheartened working for the studio system, Coppola soon after declared his intentions to self-finance the project if it ever came to fruition. So in 2019, he announced his return to the film. 2 years after, sold a portion of his winery in California to spend $120 million of his own money to fund it. After a delay caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, casting was underway by 2021. Principal photography took place from November 2022 to March 2023 in Georgia. Coppola adopted an experimental style that permitted improvisation during the shoot by letting actors write scenes and himself make spontaneous changes to the script. These methods proved divisive, leading to the resignation of the art department and visual effects team, among others, and raising comparisons to Coppola's history of challenging productions. Filming allegedly wrapped ahead of schedule. Oh, well, that's good. Interesting process, and there's a lot of history that went into this film, and that's one thing that I will say, if you were aware of the history of the film going into the movie, it almost feels like you're never truly in the film. You can be viewing it as a project or a result. Instead of like just watching it and being immersed in the story, you're kind of understanding of, oh, okay, so self-financed, and you're kind of thinking about the final product and like the journey to get here. The synopsis for the movie is: genius artist Caesar Catalina seeks to leap the city of New Rome into a utopian, idealistic future, while his opposition, Mayor Franklin Cicero, remains committed to a regressive status quo, perpetuating greed, special interests, and partisan warfare. Torn between them is socialite Julia Cicero, the mayor's daughter, whose love for Caesar has divided her loyalties, forcing her to discover what she truly believes humanity deserves. The film stars, and it is a crazy cast, Adam Driver as Caesar Catalina, Giancarlo Esposito plays Mayor Franklin Cicero, Natalie Emmanuel plays Julia Cicero, Aubrey Plaza plays a character called Wow Platinum, Shia LaBeouf plays Claudio Pulcher, John Voight plays Hamilton Crassus III, Jason Schwartzman plays Jason Zanders, Talia Shire plays Constance Crassus Catalina, Grace Vanderwall, who was on America's Got Talent and I believe won it, plays Vesta Sweetwater, Lawrence Fishburne plays Fundy Romaine, Catherine Hunter plays Teresa Cicero, Dustin Hoffman plays Nush the Fixer Berman. There's also Chloe Fineman from SNL is in this. It's a really strange cast. Like, it's just the most random group of people in a lot of cases, but oh man, okay, Megalopolis, let's get right into it. So this was insanity, absolute madness. It wasn't, it's hard to say like bad or good, but it wasn't good. It was terrible to me, but it was so unique and a really singular experience that I'm not sure I've ever had before. Like, this is a director fully diving into what they want, and the fact that it's self-funded really does show because there's just no outside input. But I think it is important to say, remember, I mentioned from the Wikipedia that this was a troubled shoot. Francis Ford Coppola also was apparently harassing extras and like kissing women without consent, and he's a very toxic person. I mean, he's 80 years old. This was apparently a very troubled shoot, as I've already said. So as I say every week, let's start with the cast because I really do want to talk about the performances first. I can honestly say I don't think there's a single good performance in here. It's pretty bad. It plays like an experimental high school play. Adam Driver as Caesar, man, he is on a bad streak for me. I think Ferrari is the only mildly interesting performance. I liked Ferrari as a movie, but I think his performance was fine. But other than that, he has only done very mediocre movies for me for the last few years. I think Marriage Story was like his last good movie that I enjoyed. So I just find nothing compelling about him in this movie. He's so kind of wooden, apart from maybe 2 scenes where he's literally going insane and it's some of the craziest shit ever. But I don't know, he tries some big things, but nothing works for me. And I'll specifically mention one moment that made me laugh out laughing. Not just me. Look, this was a very funny movie in my theater. People were laughing at it and not with it. I'll just say that. Okay, I want to get through the cast here because there's so many thoughts I have about this movie. Giancarlo Esposito as Mayor Cicero, really not good. Super poorly written. His character feels completely different scene to scene. And that goes for a lot of characters. Like there's the accents. Some scenes like people are doing random New York accents, or some scenes, I don't know. It's just like the most random accents sometimes. I'm like, what? Yeah, he feels so different like moment to moment in the movie. And it's like, is he a baddie? Like what is he? It's just, and I get that the whole point of the movie is like, oh, bad people still need to be a part of the world, I guess, or whatever. I don't know. He's not good in this. And there's some hilariously bad moments in this with him. Nathalie Emanuel, I'm not sure how you say her name, as Julia Cicero. Honestly, she's not completely terrible. It feels like TV commercial acting in a lot of moments. What I will say is the women of this movie are really not given a lot to do other than sex appeal and like be kind of love interests. And I don't know. It is what it is. It's Francis Ford Coppola. I wasn't expecting this to pass the Bechdel test or whatever, the Bechdel test. I don't know. Maybe she's one of the better performances in this movie because at least she's not completely terrible and trying super freaky things that are just really not working or poorly informed. Aubrey Plaza as Wow Platinum, on the other hand, absolutely terrible. Maybe, actually, no, I think there's another performance that's maybe worse than hers, but she is so bad in this movie. She's like playing this transatlantic reporter like, oh, yeah, here, Sonny, I'm gonna blah, blah, blah. And it's just, she doesn't do anything that's really interesting in this story. Like, I just kind of found her a nuisance, and she's just kind of used for nudity in a lot of this. So, I don't know. It was an interesting character at times, but her performance was just really not interesting at all. Shia LaBeouf as Claudio Pulcher, it was interesting. I mean, apart from 2 extremely horrible scenes of them that were just hilarious, I feel like his character kind of has the most interesting stuff in the movie. Like, whatever happens with him in the movie is at least a somewhat fascinating character arc, as opposed to, I don't know, the Caesar and Franklin stuff are interesting at least. But yeah, Shia LaBeouf, I don't know, I don't think he's particularly amazing in this, but at least his character, when stuff is happening with him, that I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. Okay, last person I'll specifically mention is John Voight, Angelina Jolie's dad, who is like a huge, I mean, politics shouldn't matter in this, but he's a huge Trump guy, and that's why he was cast in the film. Francis Ford Coppola wanted to make a movie with a bunch of Republicans, so he plays Hamilton Crassus III. Hilarious. It was literally like listening to a drunk grandparent stumble through Thanksgiving. He just says some nonsensical stuff in this that is so funny. People were just crying laughing in my theater. There's one scene where they're at like a horse chariot race or whatever, and he's just hammered and he's just saying nonsense the whole time, and he actually has the funniest line in the movie, which I will say in spoilers. Yeah, the rest of the supporting cast are all just random over the top people. I don't know, Chloe Fineman as well, like it's so fascinating she's in this. And Dustin Hoffman has like 5 one-liners in the movie, and then he's barely in it. So, I don't know. Okay, the performances are bad, but let's move on to that. There are so many ideas and aspects I want to talk, but let's start with the story, of course. I think there's definitely a story here, but it is narratively so unfocused, so messy, and just so poorly executed. I don't know. It's hard to keep up with at times. Like, there are scenes that feel unnecessarily long with monologues that are just absolute nonsense. And it's like, okay, what are you getting at here? And then there are scenes that absolutely whip by you in a moment's notice and move the plot so fast with like one action, and you're left wondering what that was. Like, it's just such an inconsistency in this movie. The movie moves moves at such a breakneck pace, and you really never settle in. There's no recognizable story rhythm. Like when it started to wrap up, I was shocked. It wrapped up every loose end in about 5 minutes. Just crazy pacing. That's one of the most strangely paced movies I have watched in a while. Just very hard to kind of get a hold of, and it's very much a roller coaster adventure ride, because it's like you don't know when the huge big incline is gonna come every time. So not only the inconsistent pacing that makes so much of it unwatchable, but the dialogue is often delivered in a way that sounds like the performer has never said it before or heard it before, and that ties directly into the directing because it is so horrendous. And this movie, and I've actually seen a few other people who clock this as well, kudos to George Lucas for knowing when to walk away from movies and realize he doesn't have it anymore, because this was a vision, and I love a big swing. It was a mess. It really just, it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. None of this ever comes together. It doesn't feel like it's ever tying up properly and like, oh, okay, now we're going to get some nice resolution. When it ends, you don't feel really resolution. You're like, oh, I guess that's it. It's wrapped up now. But such inconsistent pacing, and the directing is just so strange in parts. The final shot of the movie is one of the weirdest things, or just like a strange choice. There's so many choices in this that I think were strange, and I understand why so many people resigned from this, because it really is just one singular creative voice on screen, letting the actors run wild and experiment, do whatever their bad impulses were. But hey, maybe some actors aren't meant to improvise. And just like narratively, I feel like there are too many powerful forces in this movie. It was a little hard to get your bearings of like the showdowns that are going on. It's, it's an architect versus a mayor / DA kinda, versus a bank chairman versus a jealous cousin versus a TV reporter versus sort of a fix against a fixer. But it just feels like there's too many powerful characters, and we never really get a fully fleshed out rivalry. Like I found myself enjoying one rivalry in particular at times when we actually got a moment to breathe with it, but very unfocused a lot of the time is what I would say. It's just, there's so much crammed into this that all of our characters just get, it just feels like scene to scene, we don't even know who's going to show up now. Like, who are we going to focus on now? I couldn't predict a single thing in this movie. I saw 2 tweets, or maybe they were Reddit comments, I can't even remember. I just saw them last night and they stuck with me. That perfectly encapsulated, I think, what this movie is saying. And kinda, I think the first one said, like, I understand how bad studio interference usually is, and we talk about it a lot, but any second set of eyes really could have benefited this movie. And I think that's totally valid. I completely agree with that. It feels like he never asked anyone else to really look at it or have their input. To me, it feels like he threw it together, and it was just always going to be that way of what he wanted it to be, and throwing all of his ideas together versus, hey, could you take a look at this, tell me where I could kind of focus it in or tame it down a little bit, what moments need a little bit more exploring, what are the interesting questions, and what are the less interesting questions that maybe we don't really need to ask. There's just so many questions in this movie, that there's so many things that it's posing and ideas, but it has so many things it wants to share, but it just feels like too much. We don't really get the answers to a lot of questions, and maybe that's the point. Maybe it's just a movie that wants to ask questions about our future and ourselves and our present and the cultural moment that we're in, or maybe it's just a personal reflection of one guy wanting to ask himself these questions that he's thought about in his old age. I don't know. I think this is definitely a movie that, as poorly, or as I don't want to say poorly, as mixed of a bag the critical reception has been right now, I have no doubt this movie will be studied for years. I would confidently put money on the fact that this will be a movie that's shown in film courses, because it just asks so many questions. There's so many deeper meanings that I was trying to really seek out. Like, there were so many things that I wanted to talk about this review, and look, it could be easy to just sit here and say, this is a bad movie, don't watch it because it's so unfocused. I'm just calling out the flaws I saw, but there were things that I enjoyed that I will talk about eventually. I don't know, it feels like too easy to just say, oh, bad movie, don't see it. I didn't think it was a good movie, but I oddly still enjoyed it, and the experience and the questions it was asking, and I would encourage people to see it. Like, the other tweet I saw was, this feels more like a collection of scenes than an actual movie. The plot is barely there. You can follow a through line of things going on, even if nothing really connects them on an emotional level. The dialogue ran anywhere between Shakespearean monologues to, did he really just say that, one-liners. which is such a great point. One of the biggest things that bothered me was the lack of emotional continuity. Like, it feels like our characters change so much off screen between the scenes that there's so much of this that we're not seeing. And I was surprised, seriously shocked. This is only 2 hours, 18 minutes. I knew that going in. I expected this to be a 3 hour. I hope there's like a 4-hour director's cut, because there's so much stuff that's just left out or just feels omitted, and things that happen off screen, and just all of a sudden someone walks in, declares the change that, oh, we've gotten news, and there's just all this big change to a character. It's one of those movies where people just state the change has happened off screen and we move on in time, and it's not shown to the audience. So it's a little frustrating in that case, you know? Francis Ford Coppola, people praise him as one of the best filmmakers of all time, and yet narratively and like story-wise, it is such a flawed movie, when I think there is a great idea for a movie in here, and there are very interesting aspects that I enjoyed. It's just that there is so much excess. So again, I will say, I think this movie, you know, if he did get studio funding, I think there maybe could have been some helpful notes of, hey, we really like this idea. But at the same time, it's kind of fun to just see a perfect example of non-studio intervention, because for years now, I feel like we've, you know, with all this release the Snyder Cut, release the Ayer Cut, and all this talk of studio interference, it is kind of refreshing to see this is what a movie looks like with zero notes, zero second pair of eyes or whatever, you know, just, I don't know. It just feels like it's kind of fun to watch as a project and an experiment or an experience. As I said, this doesn't feel like a movie to me. It feels like an experiment or like a ride that we're all going to go through. And it's more of a cultural experience than like, I wasn't going to see it because, oh, I'm excited to see, you know, a movie with fun ideas. I just wanted to see kind of the product of years of development, years of ideas, him self-funding it. I think, like, I don't know. I think I compare this to Horizon and American Saga, the Kevin Costner self-funded film. That was a movie that at least had some, I don't know, ideas and can be improved upon, but there's a lot in here that I think should have just been cut out, and other things that really should have been developed and were so much more interesting. Okay, I want to get to a couple more things before spoilers, sorry. Caesar's power, so he can control time, but off the top of my head, I don't remember an interesting moment where he used his power or it really plays into the story. I don't see a reason for the time aspect being in this other than some interesting moments of dialogue. Like, I don't know. Again, it's a big idea, but it doesn't really do anything, or he doesn't really do anything with it. Oh, we have this city designer who's on the design authority who can manipulate time, but it feels like it's never really used in any interesting way. I don't know. I put on the Reddit official discussion for r/movies. I commented this morning saying, I'm writing notes for my podcast. Can anyone tell me if his powers really ever play into the story? And someone said, it does not, and then says a spoiler, but it never really matters either way. So it's interesting that we have like someone with a superpower, but it never really plays into the story. It's kind of just part of, like, it's just kind of matter of fact. Like, oh yeah, he can control time, but it doesn't matter at all. All right, visually, I want to get into the visuals of this film, because that was one of the things that from the earliest moments we saw photos or stills and the first trailer, I was like, visually, this is so unique. One of the most unique movies I've ever seen, hands down. Like, it has some of the coolest visuals and looks amazing in some moments. And then you can tell where the self-funding aspect kicks in, because it looks like a Cialis commercial in the next scene. Like, you can absolutely see where the budget constraints come in. I don't know, someone edited this movie on their iPad and just made like an iMovie slideshow and threw it into one random scene in the end. The cinematography was done by Mihai Malamer Jr., a Romanian cinematographer. He did a Jojo Rabbit, a movie I love, and he's done lots of stuff, but it feels so inconsistent at times. Like, I saw this in IMAX, as I mentioned. There were scenes where I was blown away by, wow, this is like such a spectacle. It's so beautiful. But then a lot of the Megalop CGI is hilariously terrible. Looks like a TV show where someone is clearly green screened in, and it feels like CGI, a blast from the past, like very early CGI. So it is a very interesting movie to just look at. There's one scene, and this isn't spoiling anything, where we get like a kind of, I don't know, a montage of architectural sketches. I thought that was gorgeous, and it's such a visually striking movie with the variety of aspects it brings. It brings interesting quotes on screen. It brings like statues moving that I thought looked gorgeous, and there's just, I don't know, there's so much interestingness about it. You know, there's so much uniqueness visually. I've really never seen a movie that looks like Megalopolis in my eyes. So again, like, go see it and just visually try to appreciate it at times, or not appreciate it. I don't know. I'm not telling you go love this movie. Like, I didn't love it, but it was an experience that I enjoyed. I think it's a terrible movie and it's a fucking mess, but I still had so much fun with it, and it's just fun to talk about. It's almost a movie that's more fun to talk about than it is to watch, because it's so deep in questions and thoughts that it really can spark interesting discussions, I think. Okay, a few more things before we get into spoilers. So, for a man who pledged this is some anti-woke movie, like he said, oh, I wanted to make an anti-woke movie, and on Monday night at the premiere, they had like a Q&A with Robert De Niro, and De Niro went on a huge anti-Trump rant because Francis Ford Coppola talked about he wanted to make an anti-woke movie, and De Niro, was like, Trump couldn't make a movie like this. You think some dumbass like Trump could make, and it was just hilarious. I read so many people that went to the premiere and said how uncomfortable it was watching the Q&A because it's just like kind of bickering among them. But I don't know, for a movie that wouldn't play by the rules or whatever, I mean, I think, and I made like a TikTok / reel or YouTube short kind of poking fun at the fact that he wanted to make an anti-woke movie, whatever that meant. He wanted to make a movie with canceled people. It really is toothless. Like, this is not an edgy movie. Babylon in the first 10 minutes had like visually more striking edgy shit than kind of this whole film. I don't know, it's like, oh, people using cocaine, whoop-de-doo, and there's one uncomfortable sex scene that I was like, this is so awkward, but it just feels like more awkward than edgy, or I don't know, it was just like kind of uncomfortable to watch, but it wasn't like, wow, this is so like pushing boundaries of what filmmaking could be. It's so anti-woke and edgy. People are going to be in an uproar. I don't think anybody is going to be bothered by this movie. I'm fully convinced that Francis Ford Coppola literally doesn't know what woke is, which I don't think anybody does anymore. Like, that just means caring about social injustices and having your eyes open to social injustices. It's a good thing to be woke, to look into the inequalities of others. So I don't know. I was very interested going in, like, what does he mean by he's made an anti-woke movie? He wanted to make an anti-woke movie. He's kind of tooting his own horn, and I guess he has to hype up the film, so I understand that. And also it's his single creative vision that, maybe 40 years ago this would have pushed some boundaries, but now it's kind of like, okay, you kind of see this stuff in a lot of TV, or actually this movie is unlike anything I've ever seen, but there's a lot of edginess in this film, quote unquote edginess, that you really just kind of will see in other stuff. And yeah, like his big idea to make a movie with Republicans, and he kind of has further elaborated on that, saying that he wanted a movie that will use art to unify people because we are so politically divided, which I completely agree with. We are more, I don't know, I think we are maybe more politically divided than ever, but it's hard to say because it's not like we're having World War III. But, there is his big idea of wanting to make a movie that we need, political cooperation, peace on earth, children are the future. Basically the messages of this film, if I had to boil it down, which it's hard to boil down because there's so many complex ideas, but yeah, we've seen that a million times. It's really not an original message, and it's kind of like when Mr. Beast sent that tweet about, if I was president, I would use the ideas of both sides, of both parties, and I would do what's best for the country. Like, wow, so original. You would be bipartisan. It just felt like he was like, oh, I'm making such an inspirational film and I want to make it anti-woke. What does that even mean? But also the movie doesn't feel that revolutionary or like unifying. Having said all that, I want you to understand, listening to this, that when I talked about like visually, I did appreciate the movie visually, and there were things I liked. And as I said, like, it would be so easy to just hate on this movie and be like, oh, it's a mess, I don't understand it, so therefore I hate it. It's easy to hate what you don't understand, but I think it's more fun to kind of probe it and really dive into why you didn't like it just because you didn't understand it. I'm saying kind of what lost me, but there are things that I did enjoy. I don't know, one thing that I will give him credit for, it's a deeply personal movie that it felt like a lot of it was really referencing things that I don't know because they are just kind of his personal life and his personal story and ideas or things he's experienced over the years. There are numerous storylines where you can tell it's based on something from his own life, and whether it's a relationship with his mother or his parents or whatever. I'm not saying it's a good or bad thing. It's just very interesting to see such a personal movie explored in such a form. Like, there's so much that he really could have just said to his therapist rather than put in this film, but it is seriously interesting to just see such a personally driven film, which was kind of fun to see. Like, we've talked about, I don't know, I think I mentioned Tenet on this before, that every director, I feel like in their career, makes one movie that's just fully for them and pushes what they just want to do, and they don't really seek out other opinions. Tenet was that for Christopher Nolan, and it is a mess, but it's fun. And I think this is very much the same way. I think this is a much worse movie than Tenet, and a lot less kind of I don't know, not original. What does the original mean? But like, I don't know, it is kind of fun to just see such a personal movie of someone. It's almost like it feels feels like someone's diary or someone's dreams just playing out in crazy dreams that you've had over the years, or personal feelings that you've been wanting to share or explain with the world. But yeah, I don't know, fascinating. Overall, I was never not entertained, which if you're paying to go to the movies, you want to be entertained. And look, I was fully entertained the whole time, whether I was laughing, I was confused, I was never bored watching this movie. The movie is a thrill, the whole film, whether it was sometimes uncomfortably over the top and just plain maybe a little creepy, or actually interesting just because of how different it is to anything I've ever seen. You know, it's not a good movie to me, but a fascinating self-funded magnum opus of a director who has, I mean, he's shaped films that we see today. He did the Godfather movies, but he's shaped the films today while also showing his age, holding on to maybe a time that's past. Like, I think this is really the last movie of its kind, but at the same time, what kind of movie is this? I think it is such a singular experience. As I said in my introduction, there are actual ideas in here, but they all feel extremely shallow, and it asks so many questions but never really feels like we get profound answers. And maybe that's the point. Maybe it's a movie that just wants to start a discussion but doesn't necessarily have the answers, which I'll talk about in spoilers. I rated Megalopolis 2.5 out of 5. I would recommend it as just like an interesting spectacle to experience of someone, I don't know, just someone that has been in this industry for so long and shaped it in such a way, just to see kind of his last big swing. I feel like this probably will be his last film. I don't know, it seems like it, though. Certainly the discussion around it, like this is his last big idea. So I would recommend seeing this. I cannot recommend Megalopolis enough. Go experience it for yourself. It almost feels pointless to add a rating, and it was fascinating going on Letterboxd, seeing all the reviews online of just the kind of depth of opinions, or the variety of opinions rather, of what different people thought. But let's get into spoilers. So many may be wondering, and we are in spoilers now, many may be wondering about the live audience aspect. If you know anything about the movie, its debut at Cannes, I believe, there is a live audience aspect where after the satellite, oh my god, such a random storyline, the satellite crashes into New Rome and trashes a bunch of the city. Caesar holds a press conference, and that's where, in a moment, the ratio shrinks down of the film. A live audience member usually stands at a mic and says the question, or lip syncs the question to Adam Driver in the film, and Adam Driver answers the audience member. That didn't happen at my showing, which I was a little disappointed by. It was just a voiceover in the theater, which I think will be the case for most people. So I was a little disappointed because I saw at the premiere at Cannes, at a lot of different IMAX experiences, there was a microphone set up. So I posted on my Instagram last night, and you'll know already. I guess I could have mentioned this in non-spoilers. It's not really a big deal because it's been posted everywhere, but I posted on my Instagram as soon as I walked in, no microphone setup. Extremely sad because, it is a movie that's kind of pushing the boundaries of what can we achieve in theater, kind of this mixing of live theater and a movie. I don't know what to make of it. It was fascinating, but we did get a voiceover, which was something. But okay, let's get into, I want to talk about maybe something that was interesting. I think the most interesting part of the movie for myself was really the Caesar versus Franklin parts. That was the part of the movie that I was most intrigued in, and that's what the movie is sold as, this battle between progressive, pushing for the future, new ideas, utopian guy versus this conservative guy that just wants to hold on to the present. That's what the heart of this movie is. And it's not very explored because there's just so much excess, useless stuff in this movie for me. But I wish we got really the Adam Driver and Giancarlo Esposito dynamic way more in this movie, because every time they kind of had scenes together, I was like, all right, this is kind of coming together. It's a little interesting. You can add the Shia LaBeouf aspect. That's another interesting part. And I feel like you can stop it there. This alternate kind of, we can have a discussion between the two parties, but look at the alternative of Shia LaBeouf, who is this radical creep dude. So their discussion of Caesar versus Franklin is very much questions versus solutions. Franklin, that was the most interesting part of Franklin saying, you're a utopia guy, but utopia can turn to dystopia because it's just something that asks questions but doesn't promise answers. And it's very much a battle of questions versus answers, or solutions rather. Franklin thinks that by staying in the present, we have the solutions, we have a proven way. It might not be a good way, but at least we know it's working right now, so let's stick with this because it is a clear answer to our issues. Versus Adam Driver's character, Caesar, is all about, what if we could reach for something more? What if we can make a new civilization that promises amazing things? And it's Franklin is afraid of destroying the now in favor of a better future. And there's a great quote that says, when we leap into the unknown, unknown, we prove that we are free, versus Franklin being willing to, I don't know, see new possibilities. So again, this movie is asking interesting questions. It doesn't necessarily, it doesn't say it has the answers to a lot of these questions, which, you know, that's a major issue I have with the film, is that it doesn't really try to provide any answers, but maybe that's my ignorance. Maybe the movie's not trying to provide answers, because that's the whole point. It's trying to be a utopia film that's just posing questions and doesn't have answers. Maybe it's brilliant and I'm missing the whole point. I just wish they had stripped so much back in this movie and we really developed that Caesar versus Franklin battle. And Caesar is obviously a stand-in for Francis Ford Coppola, someone who wants the movie industry to look beyond the set trends. Look at his idea, Megalopolis, and Caesar is this guy that has megalop, this idea and this new invention, and that's what this movie is representing, or it represents this movie, and Caesar is Francis Ford Coppola. So, it's look at his idea, Megalopolis, something that isn't meant to have the answers, but asks so many questions. Exactly. That's like kind of what I'm taking away from this. It's a film of utopia that's posing all these questions, but like Caesar, he's not saying he has the answers. He's just trying to pose these questions and these ideas. I don't know. The movie is unbelievably meta with its experience in this film. Like, it's the funding is the mayor and the bankers saying no and not giving Caesar the opportunity. Caesar's Francis Ford Coppola. He didn't get any studio backing for this film after years of trying. The movie is just so self-referential. Like, it's referential of the film's process and creative journey that, again, it's almost an interesting culmination of years. So it's not just you watching a movie. Like, this movie is not just defined by the 2 hours, 18 minutes runtime. It feels defined by 45 years of history or whatever. That's just so fascinating to me, of just seeing an answer to all this development. It's a very big picture thing. Like, you really do need to see it as a culmination of a bunch of things. Like, it's a mind-bending movie, because you're not only seeing a story on screen, but it's a story off screen that's kind of getting wrapped up, but it's not over yet, because, like, what does this movie mean for the future of Hollywood? Is it going to have any say on the future? It's asking a bunch of questions, but again, it's not presenting the answers of what the future is going to look like for film. It is a deeply personal movie that's like one person trying to basically have a 2 hour and 18-minute therapy session on screen. But anyways, one narrative thread that felt very oddly spaced out throughout the film, and this kind of reaches into the personal aspect, was Caesar's relationship with his mother. I don't know what Francis Ford Coppola's relationship was with his mother. Caesar forgets to mention his mother in his Nobel Prize speech. Did Francis Ford Coppola forget to mention his mom in an Oscar speech or something? And the relationship just kind of randomly pops up in spots, especially the ending. She's just walking through the crowd in the final scene and he doesn't say anything. He just says, "Thank you, Mom," or like, "We did it, Mom," or whatever. It just felt very sparsely added in. I don't know. It was very strange. Like, it felt deeply personal, but we were all kind of missing something or an aspect. So maybe that's something that you say to the therapist and you don't put in your movie. It's just like another idea that was added in that you're like, maybe we don't need that. I think it's already deeply personal enough. Like I said, his powers, the time aspect plays no role in the film at all. He loses his powers and he gets them back like 20 minutes later in the film. I posted on Reddit. I'm currently writing my notes for my podcast and I'm trying so hard to remember, does Caesar's time ability ever really play a big role in the movie? Like, I can't remember it ever playing a truly big moment and changing the trajectory of the story. Please, someone help me remember, LOL. And the first person commented, "It does not. He loses it and regains it and it never matters either way." The next person commented, "No, LOL. It could have been completely cut and not changed the story, in my opinion," which I agree with that person. It's just like an interesting added thing that, like, oh, by the way, this guy has superpowers, but it never features in the story or is never really an interesting part of the story. And I think it was totally pointless. I didn't really get where he was going with that. But speaking of powers and the idea of the megalop, which I didn't really explain, I don't know, it's this other like scientific energy. Actually, you know what? He barely explains it in the film either. I feel like I didn't get a grasp of what is the megalop. It's like this new element that he's created that he's building the city with or building things with. So Caesar randomly gets shot in the face by a 12-year-old kid that is sent by Shia LaBeouf's character. It's another plot line that just feels super messy and kind of pointless. He gets shot in the face. He uses the megalop element to rebuild his face. Then he's like kind of just fine after one psycho scene where he visits Wow Platinum, Shia LaBeouf, and Jon Voight. I don't know. It just kind of feels like another storyline that has 2 minutes total or 5 minutes total maybe, and it just doesn't really have any implications on anything else other than maybe Natalie Emmanuel's character. It's trying to demonstrate that like she can wield the megalop as well, or like we can use it for these amazing medical advancements. It's just like him getting shot in the face, and that whole part just feels very random to me and doesn't really have a say in the story. Honestly, the movie really forgets about Adam Driver and Natalie Emmanuel for a large chunk of this. Like, there is probably 30 minutes towards the end where I feel like we really abandon our main couple, and it moves on to Aubrey Plaza, Shia LaBeouf, and Jon Voight's characters for a long time. So I don't know, it was very strange. Like, we kind of just have our main characters that are in the synopsis and kind of sold as the main stars, and they're kind of just taking a backseat for a large chunk. But okay, let's get into the dialogue quickly before the end here. The dialogue is unbelievably terrible, and here are 3 of my favorite lines that got humongous laughs in my theater. The first one, Aubrey Plaza, Wow Platinum, says, "You may be anal, Caesar, but I'm oral," and then proceeds to kind of seduce him and try to crawl between his legs. Wild. Aubrey Plaza is so wasted in this movie, and she's terrible. She's just a sex-crazed gold digger and given nothing complex to do or any complex thoughts. The second, maybe my favorite, I don't know if it's my favorite, but it was just one that I was so unbelievably blown away by, and I was like, was that improvised? Adam Driver, the first time he meets Natalie Emmanuel, she comes into his office, and he's like, "Oh, I thought you were just some kid that goes clubbing and partying or whatever." She shows that she's more than that, and he's like, "So why don't you go back to the club?" And it's one of the most awkward, random deliveries I have possibly ever heard in a film, and felt so out of place. It stuck out like a sore thumb, and everybody just erupted in laughter in my theater. But that was not the one of the night that got the biggest laugh. The biggest one is Jon Voight at the end kind of portrays himself as decrepit and, I had a stroke and I'm in a wheelchair, and he kind of plays that he's unable to run his own company, but he's actually secretly going to get revenge on Shia LaBeouf and Aubrey Plaza. So he's laying in bed, and they come to visit him and pay his final respects because he's supposedly about to die, and he fakes having a boner under the blankets, and he says, "What do you think of this boner?" And it's the funniest fucking part of the movie. I could not stop laughing for 10 minutes. And then he reveals that the boner is actually a bow and arrow. He kills Wow Platinum and shoots Shia LaBeouf twice in the ass. It was crazy. It was some of the craziest line deliveries I've ever heard in a single scene, and one of the funniest things I've ever seen in a movie theater. And not in a oh, that was funny way. It was like, who wrote this? Well, we know who wrote it actually, but yeah, just wild. And there's a whole plot line where Caesar's dead wife, I don't know, Franklin framed him as the DA prosecutor that Caesar killed his wife. All that just kind of felt excess. Just never really feels like it takes a hold of the story. But the whole last scene of the movie was really hilarious to me. Like, the movie is moving at such a pace, and then all of a sudden you can feel it wrapping up. Like, okay, yep, that scene's done, that storyline's done, that storyline's kind of done, but there's still like so much left kind of unanswered. It felt like the most I've hit my page limit of my essay wrap up I've ever seen in a film. The baby, their son, or no, sorry, their daughter is just lied down on a carpet on the stage with them as they're like celebrating peace in Megalopolis, I guess, or in New Rome, which, is it a city? Is it a country? They kind of changed that halfway through. Is it in America? They're never quite clear with that, of what this is, but it's, and actually I talked about this last week with The Substance. I love in movies when they do like a glass floor effect and you're seeing the characters from below. It looks a lot worse in this because there's a random carpet and the baby's just lied down on the carpet, and it does a simple circle fade onto the baby to end the movie when they do the time stop. It's wild, man. This movie just is such an experience. Look, I'm going to wrap it up, the Megalopolis portion, and we'll move on to what else I watched in a moment. There are a few there are tons of interesting aspects of this movie, but it tries too much and it doesn't know its limits. I think some restraint could have made this a very good movie, or a much better movie. It really feels like every idea he's had, Francis Ford Coppola, in the last 45 years, and they're all just kind of thrown out there, but never explored in depth, maybe. Having said that, I actually had a lot of fun with this. As bad as I thought the movie was, it's enjoyably bad, and I would watch it again. In fact, I might watch it again. I cannot recommend Megalopolis enough, but let's move on to what else I watched. Alrighty, what else I watched? Well, I watched a few things. I watched a couple of movies, a documentary, a couple TV shows. Last weekend, I saw Super/Man, the Christopher Reeve Story. Incredible. One of the best documentaries I've ever watched. I think I cried probably 7 or 8 times throughout it. It's absolutely just devastating, but also I loved that it is obviously a deeply personal story about him and his wife and his family. I love that they did show his flawed character at times, that, you know, when he split from his first, or the mother of his children rather than his wife, because they were never married, there was a time where he kind of had a public perception about him as this playboy in the 5 months before he met his wife, Dana. Just phenomenal. Like, Christopher Reeve is such an inspiration, and the work that him and Dana did for disabled people in the United States and the world, really, that they just set kind of this new perception and this new precedent for what people with disabilities can do, and that we shouldn't be trying to heal people. We should be trying to let them live their lives to the best that they can. And that's actually a point of conflict between Christopher Reeve and his wife Dana. Is, you know, Christopher Reeve sometimes got a lot of pushback because his goal was to walk again someday, and he saw being disabled as an issue that needs to be cured, that there needs to be a cure for disabilities, whereas Dana said we need to bring accessibility to people that are disabled, and we need to help improve the ways that they can live their life as they are. And sure, cures would be great, but that's not a steady solution to just have people sit and do nothing with their lives until there is a cure. I loved the way that it told the story of him and his acting career. I mean, he was a very gifted actor, and one particularly heartbreaking part was his relationship with Robin Williams, and they were best friends. They were roommates at Juilliard, I believe, and Glenn Close, who was also a close friend and was in the first film that Christopher Reeve directed when he had his accident many years later, or a couple of years later. She says that, you know, I think Robin today still would have been alive if Christopher Reeve was alive and didn't have his accident, or at least didn't die, because of how close they were. Like, a little part of Robin died that day when Christopher Reeve died. Yeah, they show the eulogy he gives at Christopher Reeve's funeral, and it is, oh man, it's heartbreaking. And same with Dana's. I broke down, but their kids are inspirational. They're still doing so much amazing work with the Christopher Reeve Foundation, or the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. I implore people, please go watch this documentary in theaters, or when it's at home, watch it, because it had a limited release September 21st and 25th, but it was announced that it was doing so well and critically so well received. It has like 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, both audience and critic score, that it's getting a wide release on October 11th. I cannot suggest it enough to people. Superman, the Christopher Reeve Story. I gave it 4.5 on Letterboxd. It was seriously amazing. Well, I also went to the movies last weekend and not only saw Superman, the Christopher Reeve Story, but I saw Transformers 1, a very, I would say, kid-focused movie. It was not like Spider-Verse, where it's kind of trying to do a general appeal to everyone while showing animation in a fun way that kids will enjoy. It was very Marvel humor of, that just happened, and oh my god, I got these powers. They can fly now? You know, like the whole Bumblebee knife hands thing just gave me some serious secondhand embarrassment, but it was fun. I think it's a very meh movie until the last third of the movie is very enjoyable. Like the last 30 minutes, I would say, is really cool. A great final act. I think I gave it 3.5 stars. It's fun. If you like Transformers, I think you'll enjoy it. If you're a big Transformers fan, they do a lot of interesting things that haven't been done in any of the movies before. Go check it out. If you have kids, I would recommend Transformers 1. It's a good kids movie, but I also binge watched season 2, episode 6 to 10, plus season 3, and I started season 4 of Only Murders in the Building. What a fun show. Season 3 was really not as great as the other seasons, I think, but season 4, the first 2 episodes have been electric. I cannot wait to watch the rest of it. I've just been busy the last few days finishing God Emperor of Dune, also working, and etc., tons of stuff going on, but Only Murders in the Building, I can't recommend it enough as well. It's a very fun show. If you have Disney Plus, I would check it out because it's hilarious, but also, even if you're not a true crime fan like myself, I'm not a true crime person, but it's still a fun mystery element to the show that brings some dramatic tension. Marty Short, Steve Martin, they're hilarious in it. Go watch Only Murders in the Building. As I mentioned last week, I saw The Batman for the 85th anniversary of Batman, which was last weekend. Oh, it was so great seeing it in theaters again. I saw it super late at night. I think it was a 9:15 screening, and it's a nearly 3-hour movie, so we were in there for a while, but it was just exhilarating to see on the big screen. And I think I'm going to start watching it every year at Halloween. It was so nice to see it out of my living room again with a great sound system, a nice big screen, and there's just, I don't know, I think it's going to be one of those movies that I watch every year and I pick up something different every time I watch it. I don't know, there were a lot of shots that I was like, have I never noticed that before? And finally, I saw the Riddler across the street from the Iceberg Lounge in his window looking as Selena Kyle's coming out the first night that they do the stakeout. Just so great. I mean, the best Batman movie for me, definitely. Hands down, it's the best Batman movie. I cannot wait for the Batman Part 2. I'm so freaking excited for the Penguin. Episode 2 Hulu, which did crazy numbers. That had like 5.3 million viewers for that first episode. The Matt Reeves universe is very alive and well. Finally, let's talk Survivor season 47 episode 2 just quickly. If you don't want spoilers, skip ahead to the outro. TK sent home this week. He's blindsided. He got too big for his boots. I was very happy he went home. I was kind of getting annoyed by him. He's just a very egotistical, condescending man that was speaking down to all the women on the tribe and just making kind of a bromance. It wasn't very entertaining to watch. I thought it was going to be Rome or TK going home this week, and my girlfriend predicted TK going home, so very good read from her. It was a seriously great episode, and shout out to Rachel for trying to steal rice at the challenge. I think a few years ago, Jeff would have let that go and let her take the rice, but it was fun. I'm actually really liking season 47 already, and I like that Andy this week isn't really a Banu situation, and I think what I'm liking most about the season is how balanced it is. We don't have one terrible tribe. It is actually very well balanced both in screen time and in abilities of the tribes. Like, it feels like they're all physically capable, mentally capable. Any of the tribes could win the challenges, which it feels like a breath of fresh air, because I feel like the last few seasons, always one tribe that just gets beat down after beat down after beat down in the challenges. Whereas Yellow was very capable this week. And I think Andy, he put that beware advantage back and Sam found it literally an hour later or whatever. That was hilarious to me, but it was kind of nice to see, just a mixture of things happening in the episodes. So I'm enjoying Survivor 47 so far. I think it's been a good mixture of classic Survivor things to happen, but also new era elements that they're bringing in. So yeah, lots going on. What am I seeing this weekend? Well, I'm going to try and watch the other episodes of Only Murders in the Building to catch up for Tuesday. I haven't mentioned The English Teacher because I didn't have time to watch it. I'm starting Heretics of Dune this week, the 5th out of 6 books. I'm actually going to maybe read a bit today after I edit. On Monday night, I'm seeing The Wild Robot and Joker 2. But yeah, lots to watch. There's tons. The Penguin episode 2 is coming out Sunday night, and Agatha Harkness Into Darkness or whatever it's called. Agatha All Along. Literally, what's that show called? I can't remember. I haven't watched it yet. I'm gonna watch it. I'll probably end up binge watching it because I just don't have the time or the energy to get into it right now. I haven't heard the worst things in the world about it, but that has been what else I watched for episode 37. And I think that's going to do it for episode 37, Megalopolis. What a ride. Like, not a great movie, but an interesting movie. I think it's interesting how bad it is, but I also think it's just an interesting discussion. And it almost feels too simple to just brand it as bad. But as always, rate, review the show, 5 stars on all of your streaming platforms. Follow the show, download the episodes, and share them with friends. Rate it 5 stars on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Acast, and wherever you get your podcasts on streaming platforms. We are also on YouTube. Go like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Comment below, what do you think the future of AI is? What do you think of the Kyle Chandler casting? What do you think of Megalopolis? Did you see it this week? Was there a live element in your showing? Let me know. I'd love to hear from you. You can also get in touch with the show via email at watcherofallthings@gmail.com. Let me know all your thoughts. What movies are you looking forward to this fall? Because believe it or not, we still have a jam-packed fall to come. There's still so many movies that are going to be coming out. We also are on social media. We're on Instagram and Threads at Watcher of All Things. It's just at Watcher of All Things, whereas the TikTok is watcher.of.all.things. I'm trying to get a microphone that'll work with my phone so I can record a little more recorded, just handheld things for social media and like shorter videos, I guess. So stay tuned there. Also follow my personal letterbox, KikiJ70. That's KIKIJ70, KikiJ70. I make tons of lists there. You can see constantly updating my 2024 ranked films. You can see all of the films and where they sit. Go see where Megalopolis sits. Next week, Joker 2, Folie à Deux. Can't say I'm excited. I wasn't a fan of the first Joker film, but it looks like they're trying to do something different in this one, which I appreciate. So that'll be next week. I'll also talk about The Wild Robot, hopefully be caught up on Only Murders in the Building. Lots to talk about still next week. But as I mentioned at the top of the show, thank you all so much. I feel like the podcast is kind of growing every week. Like, I see the download numbers bumping every week, and it's just great to see. It's fun to build a little community. Thank you all so much for the great messages. I hope you have a fantastic week, and I will see you in the next one.